Welcome to Beyond the Walls, a podcast for women ready to break barriers and step boldly into their purpose. I'm Kylie, your coach and guide for overcoming fear, silencing self-doubt, and building a life of courage and connection. Whether faith is your anchor or you're still trying to figure it out, this is a space for growth, authenticity, and transformation. Subscribe now and let's start building the courage to be seen, heard, and unstoppable. This is Beyond the Walls, where your purpose begins. I'm wondering if you would consider yourself a good listener. If you had to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you place yourself? What even defines being a good listener to you? Would your friends say you're a good listener? Are you the one that people go to and they can just talk for hours and tell you all of the things? I think I'm a pretty good listener. I love to ask questions. I'm totally invested in the conversation. I want to know more. I'm super curious. And I think that's what makes me a good listener. I've really like caring, being interested, and wanting to hear more. But when I'm hurt, I am not a very good listener. I am so focused on being heard, being listened to, that it can become nearly impossible to hear the other people accurately, right? Because we can be listening, but we can also be so quick to just be thinking about what our response is going to be, what the defense is going to be, proving their point, disproving their point, proving yourself, right? Like, it's really hard when it feels like it's high stakes. But when it's just listening to a friend and it's somebody else, totally easy to be done. You know, I've been going through a couple of different personality value set kind of quizzes, and my husband has too. And so every time we do this, we're shocked, but also it helps bring healing and it brings hope to our dysfunction. Because we could not be more opposite. Everything about us, the way we process information, the way we communicate, the way that we're motivated, the way that we like to show support for other people, y'all, it makes us want to kill each other. It causes so much conflict and hurt and misunderstanding. And you know, I feel like there's so much conversation these days, especially on social media. There's so many influencers and coaches and relationship coaches. And then we're so triggered on all of the narcissists and the abusive relationships and needing to really like protect ourselves. And if we're not feeling loved and seen all the time, then we need to go. And I think the thing that's been sticking out to me the most is realizing how much we can, should, need to be able to just lower the significance on our humanity. When my husband and I are having conflict or we're triggering each other, it has more to say about ourselves than it does about the other person. I'd say most of the time when we get through these really hard conversations, we do verbally reestablish, like, we do love each other. I bet we are much more on the same page than it feels right now, than we're experiencing right now. Like, we really do want the same things. We just have very different ideas on how we're going to get there. And along the way, it's really triggering. And so today I want to just kind of break down like the challenges of listening and really owning for yourself that those two things are always at play. We're either prioritizing listening to the other person to what they're actually trying to say and understand them, or we're focused on trying to make sure that we are understood. And I feel like they're both really valuable, but it's really hard for them to happen at the same time. But if we are intentionally choosing to put that on, that I'm going to be aware that that's what's at play. Because something changes in our listening when we're more focused on being understood. And I think it puts a real wedge in our ability to understand, because we're constantly, there's so much going on in our minds. We only know what we're thinking, what our intentions were, what our motives were. And until the other person actually admits it and is honest, all of those things are just speculations and judgments that we're making on the other person. They're assumptions that we're making. It's condemnation, it's judgment that we're putting on them to tell the other people what they are or are not doing and why they aren't doing it. And so it's important that we're really trying to understand what the dynamic is doing to them, and for us to be aware of what the dynamic is doing to us. And those are very different things. So as we go through this conversation, I want you to be thinking even in that context, right? Even from where you thought in the beginning of like why you are or are not a good listener, or why you are or are not trying to be understood. Because at the same time, right? Again, in that opposite realm, I'm always trying to be understood. And I would say my husband views a lot of the kinds of things that it takes to be understood usually shows up as him experiencing it as defensive and argumentative. And I'm like, there's got to be like gray areas. There's got to be layers to that. So I don't know which end of the spectrum you are, if you're more like me or more like my husband, but either way, there is hope. There is a way to see through to the other side. And I think the ability to really see the other person that you're talking to, really taking into consideration their values, their personality, their perspective, their listening skills, their communication skills, their ability to show up vulnerable, their safety to be honest, to be seen and heard. And I think that's what gets confusing too, right? Is that it is about them. Like it says something about them and what they're experiencing. But one, we're so quick to make it mean something about our value and about our worth. And two, we're so quick to interpret it about ourselves or to take on responsibility about it. Like if I did it differently, it wouldn't be this way. There's something that we can control about it, right? And I think if you've read the Love Languages book, right, like there are things that we can do to love each other, to speak the language for each other, to understand how to help each other, to communicate, to feel safe, to be open. But at the same time, how do we keep separating out what's my responsibility and what's their responsibility? So I think for me, a couple of things that, that cause struggles in our ability to listen is the emotional investment. When something really matters to us, it's really hard to let it go. It's hard to not get locked into a particular outcome of what we think needs to happen or how to repair it. And especially when you're dealing with two different people, it's really hard because we're going to have different ideas of what that looks like to repair. And it takes a lot of emotional energy to not give into the fears and not to give into the lies. I think there is an actual fear, and I would say this would be for me, that I'm not going to be heard, right? It's really hard to feel like it's going to happen. And who gets to be heard first? If it's about you, then is it going to be able to be about me, or is it only going to be about you? And I think it can be the same fear for both of us. And so not giving into that fear that we're not going to be understood. And I think that's the value of having lots of close people in your life that you can talk to. When you don't limit yourself to just one person, maybe you don't need to be understood by that person right now. Maybe the thing that they're going through right now, or the hardship, or it's just so hostile and conflicting and tumultuous, you need to go talk to an outside person. Someone who's not as personally, emotionally invested or triggered in the situation. There are people where you can go get heard and understood from. And if your part of your journey is with faith, then 1000% that is the place for prayer. That is the place to seek God. Like God knows even more than you do about you. And I think that's the biggest challenge, I think, for all of us, is to not also be so quick to just wall ourselves in to say, oh, I know exactly what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling it, and this is it. In that same space, we can kind of stop listening to ourselves, right? And so leaving that room to listen to the spirit, to listen to what might have been just a presumption of myself. What am I actually upset about? And I think the hardest thing, especially when it's in a relationship, in a long-term relationship, is there's so many old wounds and triggers. And here we go again, and repeat offenses. And it's so easy for us to just automatically hear a particular word or to feel a particular tone or a body language movement, right? And we're like, oh, I know where this is going. Yep, here we go. One of the things that I've been asking lately for my husband is, what's your face? We're having a conversation about something, and we're both just having a hard time in our own lives right now, right? And so because we're so opposite, it's super easy for us to just trigger each other. And we're having to work really, really hard to be on the same team. And so it's so easy for me to see a look or just his physical features and immediately feel something negative. And so I've literally just been asking that. I'm like, what's your face? Like, what should I interpret based on your body language right now, your tone? Like, what are you actually feeling? Because instead, when we're not really listening and we're just focused on being heard and assuming and proving my point, I'm going to interpret that look however it's going to work for me. And it may or may not be accurate. And so how to just keep fighting to even bring those things into actual words, into actual facts, right? So, so hard. And I think the last one that is so difficult is our ego and our identity, right? I think, man, okay, so if I am making him mad, or he is really frustrated, or he's really disappointed, can I still be whole and complete and lovable if that were true? Can you? Does it mean that all of your value has been stripped away and you're not good enough and you're filled with shame and guilt? And I think it's one thing to feel bad for something, to take ownership. You shouted at your kids, you were rude to somebody, you yelled back at them, you said a hurtful thing. Are you willing to go back and apologize? Are you willing to go back and say, man, that was really harsh. I'm sorry. It's so hard to apologize, especially then when you're focused on being the one that is heard before listening. It's so challenging. So I hope that as you're listening to this, you're thinking about those relationships in your own life. What is causing you those wounds, those automatic triggers that just rub you the wrong way, right? They just cause so frustration. You're just so quick to go into that automatic listening space of like, here we go again. I already know what they're thinking and I already know what they're doing and how this is going to go. Are you treating them as if they've already committed that offense? What would it take for you to look at this particular situation with fresh new eyes, without any of that old baggage, the old wounds, and just deal with what's happening in this immediate moment? So hard. So as we kind of close this out, I want you to consider ways that you can grow in your ability to listen. And I'm just going to go through the letters of listen, okay? So L, I want you to let go of the need to win. In a relationship, there is no win or lose. You either both win or you both lose. Do you want the connection or do you just want to be right? Do you want to hear about how the other person's experience is, or do you only want to be listened to and understood? I is investigate before you respond. Ask those questions, right? What's your face? What did you mean by that? Can you explain that again? What I heard you just say was ... S. Stay present instead of preparing a defense. As much as I talk on here about being curious about yourself, curious about what you're making it mean, curious about your own values and your own worth, I want you to honor the other person you're talking to with that same curiosity. Boy, what are they actually trying to say? Because sometimes we're not great with our words and we say one thing and it doesn't accurately portray what they're actually trying to communicate. Right? They might be feeling fearful. And so they're going to say it in a way that's a little more guarded than what it actually, right? I think of that between like anger and hurt. Anger is a form of hurt, but it's so much more protective, right? I feel like those are two words that I really connect with in a different way. That I'm like, it's one thing to be angry, but it's much more impactful and honest for me to be able to admit, like, no, I'm actually hurt. It allows this deeper sense of vulnerability. T is take a breath and pause before responding. Really consider the words that you're going to say next. Really consider what you heard from that other person before just automatically responding, especially if the sentence is going to start with, yeah, but. So easy for us to do. E is empathize, even if you disagree. And I think can only be done when we really are caring about the other person. We're curious about the other person. And I think it does take a level of security on our part to be able to empathize with other people. Because when it's not all about just defending our value or proving that you love me, you don't love me, like it turns the focus on ourselves and it doesn't allow the focus that really needs to be on the other person to really hear them. And N is notice patterns and triggers. You know, when you start having these conversations, I love being able to have analogies when we're having conversations. My sister and I do this. My mom and I do this a lot. And especially when we're able to talk about hard things, when we're not in the heat of the pain, I think is the best time to be able to do this. And it just allows kind of this buffer of like, okay, we're both on the same team. We're both hurt about something. We're both frustrated about something. We're both wanting something better. And when you have an analogy, you can use this as context. Like, hey, how are we gonna, it just gives us words when we don't really have the words that we need. And it allows a mutual language that allows us to be on the same page. Because I think it's really important that we define our terms, like the hurt and the anger, right? Are you actually angry or are you hurt? And what is it for you? Maybe it triggers one thing for you, but it triggers something else in somebody else. And so being able to come up with a language and a context, a safe space that you can have these conversations around, I think creates a buffer is a great word for it, I think, of just being able to lower that significance, lower the pain, lower the pressure, to be able to have a calm and collected conversation. And so I want you to put this into practice this week. Start one is always to just start getting curious about yourself. Just be aware when you're in these conversations with other people, just start listening to yourself. Becoming familiar with your triggers, your automatic reactions, what it's making you feel in the moment. And then start to kind of get curious about what might be going on for them, right? And all of that happens before you've even brought anything up to that other person. Because when you start to just become familiar with your own triggers and your own things that are happening in you, you're that much more conscious of them. You're less of a victim. It's not being done to you. It's not circumstantial. It's something that's just is in your control. It is inside of you. And being able to then consider like, okay, how can I really listen to this other person? When is the time for me to be heard and for them to be heard? Because honestly, don't we both you want the other person to be heard, right? I assume we both want that. And if not, then that's a whole nother conversation. So send me a message if that's you. I want to hear about it. And so what's one conversation that you can have this week where you can practice listening first? Maybe it's your easiest relationship and you can even let them know, hey, you know what? This is a skill I'm going to work on. Can you help me? Let me know when you're not feeling heard, right? Sometimes it's easiest when it's a safe relationship that's not full of tension. Go practice on those people before you go to the heavy hitters, the real hurtful ones, right? The ones that have the long past that's still trying to be repaired. Those aren't the ones to practice on. Go practice on the easy, safe people first. Get stronger, get comfortable, get familiar. And so I encourage you to spend time this week thinking through, getting curious, and then share it with a friend. Maybe you can share this episode with the person that you're having the conflict with and just say, hey, let's use this as our analogy. What do we think about this? How can we grow in this area together? So go be great listeners. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Walls. If this episode inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend and leave a review. Your support helps more women step into their courage and purpose. Ready for more? Subscribe to the podcast and contact me. You can find me at beyondthewallspodcast.com. Reach out for coaching, more resources, and all the support you could need. Remember, breaking through the walls is just the beginning. Your best life is waiting.